Hey guys, I'm Dylan. This is Mark, and we're sort of here to talk a bit about NLB. I think NLB is, as a tournament, is relatively undercovered, underrepresented. I don't think there's a lot of info on it. There isn't even English casting for a lot of it. So we've gone and looked at a lot of the NLB matches in the semis and quarterfinals and sort of done a bit of analysis because I think there's some really, really interesting NLB matches that I don't think a lot of you guys saw. So we've sort of tracked CJ Frost and NaJin Blacksword, the two finalists, and their path to the finals, and sort of looking at some of the strategies they used and some of the play of their players.
Right. So the NLB features the top 8 teams in Korea, and the finalists could be anywhere technically from seeded 2nd to 5th.
Yeah.
Depending on a bad OGN bracket, the second place team could be eliminated in the first round, which is unfortunate. But either way, we always see very highly skilled, high ranked teams in the finals.
Yeah.
Because, well, that's just the nature of the tournament. You have to beat a lot of really good, you have to beat a few top 8 teams to get to the finals. So we've seen NaJin Blacksword in the finals a few times, and Frost as well a few times. And I expect this game to be a very high-quality game, high-quality match.
So first we can just take a quick look at CJ Frost, former OG winners back in 2012. 2013 was a really bad year for CJ Frost. They had a lot of roster shuffles, especially in the mid lane, and they just had some very, very poor performances in OGN. And they've sort of went through a rebuilding phase in late 2013 after losing a lot of games. And after picking up Coco Swift in the mid lane, I really like CJ Frost now, and I think they've improved a lot. They kind of throw games sometimes, I think. They have a habit of throwing games, but I think it's getting better, right? In NLB, they haven't been throwing games, and I think they're really improving, and I like CJ.
Right, and while we're talking about rebuilding teams, NaJin Blacksword has recently announced that they're basically gutting their entire team that they've been playing with for all of NLB so far. Only Kane remains their support. The other 4 members have all gone to other teams. Limit and Nagne have actually gone to the KT Bullets, who NaJin Blacksword eliminated in the semifinals of NLB. So that's a really interesting switch. They've actually traded top laner for top laner. Leopard is now going to Blacksword, and Limit is going to the Bullets. But anyways, NaJin Blacksword, very underrated team, I think. We mentioned that they were 2-time winners of NLB, 1-time finalists of NLB, and they're here again. They're going to be at least a finalist of NLB this season. It'll be interesting to see who shows up to the game on.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure. I think there is some roster regulations in NLB that require you to use some percentage of your players. I know Kane will show up.
Kane will be there for sure.
Kane will be there, but I'm not sure which team is going to show up. I'm sort of a little disappointed that they didn't keep more of their roster because although they didn't have the best performance, they did go in the group stages of champions like they seem to be doing every single season now. They're not that bad. They had a really hard group, and they sort of choked in one, I guess, in the group stage, really key important match. And I think the team had potential. I really liked Helios' performance in NLB, watching through it all, and I guess we're probably never going to see what that team could have been because they gutted the entire roster. So,
well, I want to talk about Limit in the top lane. And I want to talk specifically about his niche picks. And if we see Limit in the top lane for the finals, I think you might end up seeing some of these niche picks coming through. And I think you'll end up seeing it on KT Bullets next season.
Yeah, probably the most interesting pick that they used in the semi-finals and quarterfinals that not a lot of professional teams are using is Rengar. And Rengar used to be really strong and then was disabled for a long time. And then after the Rengar rework, he's just been seen as a sort of weak champion. A lot of Rengar mains have sort of been going on about how they think he's not that strong anymore and he's not really viable at all. And NaJin Blacksword actually used Rengar extremely successfully in the quarterfinals against the KT Arrows. And then they picked Rengar again in the first game against the KT Bullets in the semifinals, in which I think was probably my favorite League of Legends match of the past couple months. I don't think it was the best played League of Legends match in the past couple months, but I think it was probably the most strategically interesting one, just as far as the picks and how it played out. So I have here, NaJin Blacksword ended up playing a really, really aggressive pick-based one-shot someone at level 6 team comp. They played Rengar in the top lane, Annie Draven in the bottom lane, Lee Sin in the jungle, and Orianna mid. And basically, the game plan, you can kind of see from that comp, is going to be Rengar teleports bottom, stealths in, and they just one-shot and cash in the Draven and get him super fed. So when I saw these picks, I was like, okay, Rengar, not really sold. And then I saw the Draven, the Annie, and it was just like, it was really exciting. And this game just played out in the weirdest and most interesting way. So I think it's definitely worth looking into.
Yeah, of course. Both teams really knew what they had to do to win the game. And one team did a slightly better job of coming through. And we'll show you that in the clips here.
So our first clip is pretty basic. It's just Rengar having a tough time in lane early against Renekton. And Insect just comes in on jungle Jax, actually, with a pretty good gank and picks up a pretty easy gank kill here, just because Rengar just has a lot of trouble laning against a character like Renekton early. He might have been a little overextended, but realistically, like, they could have dived this pretty heavily, and it just shows sort of the weaknesses of the Rengar pick.
Right, Rengar is a fairly weak laner early, but they do have a few options of ways they can use his power in other ways and in other lanes. So in the second clip here, we see Jack starting Dragon, and Rengar is going to make a play on the bottom lane with his teleport. So he actually teleports in and uses his ultimate to stealth onto them, and he gets a great Flash Tibbers initiation, and there's a great team fight, great follow-up by Draven, hits the ultimate on both members of KT, and it's just an excellent use of Rengar to gank the bottom lane and cash in on those Draven stacks.
Yeah, so like despite, and this is why it's so interesting, despite all the weaknesses of Rengar early and him getting first blooded and Renekton being very strong, they managed to make like a really game-changing play off of Rengar teleport. And at this point, like, I was really excited. I'm like, wow, this is like a new strategy. It's interesting. They're using a really non-normal pick to pretty decent success.
Right.
And then what ends up happening next, I guess it's not that exciting, but it excited me personally because Rengar walked back into the lane later into the game, and he can't lane. Like, even though he picked up 2 assists, he just can't lane.
Right, there's nothing he can do at all against this Renekton and Jax combo. Renekton has him chunked, and he's even almost pushed up to Rengar's tower here, and Jax just comes in. It's a fairly easy gank. Rengar actually manages to just barely get out using his ultimate, but the important thing here is that Rengar's ultimate is on cooldown now. He can't make a play elsewhere on the map with it. He loses his tower anyways. He's essentially dead on the map as far as the team goes.
Yeah, I thought it was just really interesting strategically that you have Blacksword using the Rengar pick and getting like an insanely fed Draven off of it. They were using it correctly. And KT Bullets were also properly exploiting the weaknesses of the Rengar pick. So I was sort of wondering during the game, I was like, who's going to win? It was interesting. And the game sort of ends up playing out in a sort of odd way.
Yeah, it's a little bit anticlimactic here. Rengar tries to make another TP play, which is what he has to do to keep his team in the game, right? So he TP's mid looking for a gank on Lulu, and his whole team is waiting in the bush to follow up on the gank. He TP's mid here, and he sees Renekton only. And you can see him actually hesitate. He's not even sure if he should go in on this. He decides to go in anyways, and the gank basically is nothing. It accomplishes nothing except waste his teleport and ultimate. They get a little bit overzealous here and decide to go for a dragon since they're all grouped up as 5, and KTB looks a little bit split, and they do have the very strong Draven, so it's not impossible for them to win a fight, but they are a pick comp. Rengar's ultimate is down. He's a very weak fighter at this stage in the game, and also KTB has such a strong Renekton that it's going to be very hard for them to win a team fight. Jax comes around underneath the team here off screen and sort of zones out a little bit and actually just ends up dying to the team, but Annie Tibbers' Jax only, and they get the pick on Jax, but that leaves all of their CC down and allows Rengar to just get into the back line of NaJin Blacksword and clean up everything. And Renekton is just so strong during this fight, and Rengar could not really accomplish what he needed to get done.
And despite cashing in the Draven stacks, Draven, who is probably the most fed, tied with Renekton maybe person in the game at that point in the game, Draven is alive throughout the entire team fight, and it just doesn't even matter. So I thought that game was pretty interesting. After that fight, like, honestly, there really wasn't much Blacksword can do. They really needed the second, third Rengar ultimate to land more kills, and more picks, and it just didn't work out. And at this point, the Renekton was just so strong, and they had such a poor actual really fighting comp that they just lose every fight for the rest of the game, and it just sort of closed out anticlimactically.
Yeah, Renekton sort of became unkillable, and they just took all the objectives, and they were even tower diving. There was really nothing that NaJin Blacksword could do because they lost the power of. They didn't have the power to fight them unless they were ahead or got a good pick, and they didn't properly use that power in that one dragon fight there. It put them too far behind.
Yeah, so NaJin Blacksword used a sort of unorthodox pick in Rengar, and although it was successful, they did win games with Rengar in the quarterfinals against KT Arrows, but it was ultimately pretty unsuccessful against the Bullets. And what they ended up doing in this set is they ended up switching up their top lane picks for 2 of their victories in the next couple games, and they were actually using Rumble, who is seen a little bit more. There are a few Rumble players in Korea, but he's another non-meta fitting champion. Like it changes your play style a lot. So we actually have a few clips from one of the Rumble games that they won.
So here we have Rumble in the same matchup versus Renekton in the top lane. And the difference here, although Rumble and Rengar have a lot of the same weaknesses in lane, like they're very vulnerable to ganks, vulnerable to dives, Rumble pushes the wave early. So in this, Lee Sin knows that Rumble's going to be pushing and knows that Pantheon is going to be coming for a gank. Renekton sees Pantheon coming around behind Rumble and goes aggressive on him, but Lee Sin's already there for an easy kill on Renekton.
Yeah, Rumble is a little bit different in lane as far as when he's strong, but definitely can't deal with jungle pressure. Like that's the main weakness of Rumble. Like it's really difficult when the jungler starts showing up and camping you. And when Blacksword was playing Rumble, they'd put a lot of jungle pressure up top to sort of counter that and use the early pushing of Rumble to sort of make a couple good plays. We have a second clip here of just a sort of similar thing. I guess a bit of over-ambition from Insect going in for a dive, but it just shows that they're putting a lot of pressure on with 2 people top, and they end up getting this Rumble really, really fed.
Right, so that's essentially, that is 2 kills for Rumble at this point in the game, and he's just so strong, he can almost bypass the laning phase by getting those 2 kills. He doesn't really have to lane against Renekton anymore. Renekton can't stay in lane. He just takes too much harass because Rumble's too far ahead, and this is exactly what Rumble needs to lane effectively in competitive League of Legends. So we can see here in the next clip, the gold is fairly even, and we can see how Rumble is used in a team fight now that he's ahead of the enemy top laner. They have the ability to win these mid-game and mid-late game team fights with the Rumble ultimate, which is such a great zoning tool. So we see them setting up for a Baron here. Everyone comes over, and they actually see Renekton coming down to try and clear out this pink ward. Rumble ults him from really far away, and they get the catch. Pantheon drops in, but all they really have to do is kill this Pantheon. He's separated so far from his team because of the range of Rumble ultimate. And then they can just turn and clean up the fight a little bit. Renekton goes down. And this is going to turn into a free Baron for NaJin Blacksword, which will lead into NaJin Blacksword sieging in the bottom lane, which is our next clip. So here we are sieging in the bottom lane. And in this fight, I want to watch Renekton and Rumble and see the effectiveness of Renekton in the fight versus the effectiveness of Rumble in the fight. The gold has opened up a little bit because of the Baron in the last clip, and we see that Pantheon gets a little bit antsy and just has to start a fight because of the siege power, and Rumble gets a great ultimate right across the stairs at the entrance here, zoning out all the carries, and it's just such an easy cleanup for NaJin Blacksword because none of the KT Bullets carries were even in that fight. Renekton and Pantheon just died on their own.
Yeah, so they ended up picking up 2 wins with Rumble in that series, and it proved to be a really effective pick for them. Do you think Rumble is actually like really strong, really viable right now?
I saw Rumble used effectively in this way. I think if anything goes wrong in that first fight, Rumble's such a dangerous and risky pick. If he falls slightly behind, he's so hard to make comebacks on. He does have that great mid-game team fight, but if a Renekton gets ahead of you, Renekton has a very strong mid-game team fight too, and it's very hard to deal with for a lot of these kind of weak AD carries in the early mid-game.
Right, and the jungler can kind of just show up and dive you over and over again, which I think is probably Rumble's biggest weakness is jungle pressure.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if we're going to see Limit in the top lane in the finals, actually. And it's something I sort of wanted to see was how
Swift
was going to deal with these picks like Rumble and Rengar, because I feel like a lot of these picks in lane sort of have so much to do with the jungle interaction.
Yeah.
And I guess it's a good time to move on to CJ Frost, because I really thought that the most interesting thing of watching CJ Frost's series was Swift's like early game decision making of the way he would use the power spikes of his laners, like the timing of when his laners are strong, the other laners are weak, to create very like unexploitable kill setups that are really, really hard to deal with. Like, there's one thing making plays where you're ganking and outplaying your opponent. It's another thing where people overextend and misplay. But I personally think, like, when you're jungling, the true way to take picks and bans, the true way to take early pathing into jungle is try and create kill setups that really use the power spikes of your team to make it really hard to deal with and make it like almost like unexploitable, almost like, what can I even do? Like, that's how the other team should be. It should be like, I can't even do anything. I'm just dead. So Swift, although I don't think his play was perfect, I don't think he's like the best jungler in the world or anything, Swift, along with his team, managed to create a lot of really, really good kill setups in their sets where they won against SK Telecom T1K and SK Telecom T1S. And I just chosen a couple clips of Swift's really good decision making. And it sort of shows how, although this isn't him doing flashy plays, it shows how being in the right place at the right time and picking the right lane matchups can put your team in some really good positions.
So in this clip, we see Lee Sin late invading Swift's red buff here, and he actually gets the red buff and level 2 ganks bottom. He actually gets a pretty good chunk onto Twitch, but this Swift sees this, and it allows him to take the race, which is crucial because it'll allow him to hit level 3 after stealing the red buff. And now it actually makes it easier for him to tower dive Mundo, which is what his plan was from the beginning. He wanted to be on the top side of the map, secure the 2 top side buffs, and then go to top lane to get this Jax ahead of the Mundo going into the mid and late game.
Yeah, and this like stems all the way from champion select to level 1. Just smart jungle pathing allows the Kazakhs to get to top lane to exploit the weaknesses of Mundo early and use the strengths of Kazakhs early. And you'll see they actually execute this gank pretty well also, and it ends up being a pretty guaranteed kill. Yeah. And you see Swift sort of comes in here from behind, and Marn must know at this point, like as soon as Kazakh shows up, that he's pretty dead. And he comes in behind, he actually gets a good body block almost, like he kind of blocks him between the creeps. He's pretty dead at this point anyways, but yeah, Marn goes in, he gets hit a couple times, and he's just going to flash out, and Jax instantly jumps on him. They pick up the kill. Lee Sin gets here, but he's level 2, so there's really not much Lee Sin can do here. He's going to die as well, and Swift picks up a double kill to start the game. And the way this game ended up playing out is basically that Jax just got completely out of control. Shy was like 1v3ing people by the end of the game. Like, it got really ridiculous. So it just shows how some good planning and good early decision making can snowball your lanes.
Right. So in the next clip, we have Lulu versus Shyvana in the top lane, which we need to talk about for a minute before we roll the next clip. Lulu is such a strong lane bully early against some of these bruisers who are kind of weak early and have poor wave clear in the first 6 or 8 levels. But once the bruisers start hitting those power spikes at level 8 or 9 or really any time later than that, it's very hard for Lulu to lane against them.
To deal with jungle ganks, right? To deal with dives at that point, because the Bruiser can tank the tower so easily and dive the Lulu, and she's just kind of vulnerable on her own. Like, the fighting isn't that bad in the mid game, but the main problem is when the junglers show up. So when CJ was playing SK Telecom T1K in the semifinals, Impact played his Lulu top lane, and once again Swift just sort of knows the power spikes of the various laners and comes in for a really smart gank at around 9 minutes. Yeah, around 9 minutes into the game. And you'll see, even before he dives, he walks into the bush, fakes back. Presumably this is just to see if Lulu notices or something. To be honest, I'm not sure. He runs up and he actually gets a deep ward by the golems just to make it even safer. And at this point, he has vision for the counter gank, and this is just such a guaranteed kill onto Lulu. Like, there's nothing he can do. Like, they can just dive this. They can dive this second tier turret. This Lulu is gonna die. So it's not a particularly fancy play, but it's smart play. And Swift was making these plays all throughout the NLB quarterfinals and semifinals, and really getting their lanes ahead with smart use of mainly Kazakhs and some good ganks.
Yeah, and really identifying Shyvana's power spike at that level.
Yeah, and last clip we have here, it's a pretty simple one as well. It's something CJ Frost has actually been doing a lot. They've been picking aggressive supports with Jinx against immobile bottom lanes, and they've been sort of using it to try and set up a lot of early kills in the 2v2, and they've had varying success with it. I don't think it's been working every time, but here we saw how Swift sort of notices his strength of his bottom lane early and comes in for a pretty strong level 3 kill onto, I think they end up killing Zyra here. And just look at the damage. Like, look at how overkill it is for him to even show up. He just shows up in the right lanes at the right time.
Right. And it's really good identification of the strength or the counter pick of his lane against the enemy bot lane. He knows even if they're playing a little bit safer, Karma is able to get that snare onto either Kog'Maw or Zyra because they're both so immobile that it's going to convert into a kill on one of them either way.
Yeah, so that's definitely one story about CJ Frost is Swift's decision making and his ability to get his team ahead early. And we also, if we're talking about CJ Frost's performance in NLB, it's really important to talk about Mad Life.
Yeah, Mad Life has been extremely underwhelming in the NLB for this season so far. Watching him play has been kind of like watching a highlight reel of him feeding for the past few months.
Yeah.
It's been very disappointing to see because CJ Frost in general as a team has been playing pretty well, I think, for their standards, or especially coming out of their poor performance last year. But Mad Life's performance, I still haven't seen it on the level of his teammates yet.
Yeah, if you just watched the games, it's just glaringly obvious. Like the amount of free deaths he's giving out throughout the series. And I think a lot of it has to do with the same sort of mistakes he's making over and over again. A lot of it is him trying to force plays where there aren't plays. A lot of it is he just starts a lot of poor 2v2 fights. So we have a couple clips here. Honestly, this reel could be pretty long if we took all of the poor Mad Life deaths throughout the series. It's pretty sad. But here are a few.
So in this clip, we see that CJ Frost has just won a fight at the enemy blue buff. Lee Sin is dead for the time. Twitch stealths in here to try and start a little bit of a fight, or maybe just to get back to lane safely. And he's actually ahead of Mad Life here. And Twitch still manages to escape before Mad Life even realizes that Dr. Mundo is TPing on him. Mad Life kind of blows his flash here for no reason and just kind of dies to this TP gank, even though Twitch is equally as immobile because he didn't have the speed from his stealth. He had already used it, and he still manages to escape totally safely without flashing, without healing, and Mad Life cannot do that.
And this is just another clip from the same game, and it's despite like that death, CJ Frost, I think this is the game where Jax ended up getting super fed, ends up getting pretty far ahead, and you see Mad Life just goes in while his team's doing Baron and just gets completely 100-0 picked off before the fight even begins. And despite this, they go in and their team just gets the Baron, fights 4v5, and ends up like killing them all without losing a single member. And it was kind of the story of this series against SK Telecom T1S, where Mad Life would sort of get picked off and then his team would just win 4v5 anyways. And I don't know, it's just something that was like pretty glaringly obvious when you're watching.
Yeah, you can really see it in a lot of Mad Life's play over the course of this set and also over the course of his set against K. We do have one more clip from the set against S. Mad Life is playing Thresh here, and they look like they have a little bit of a lane advantage, and they want to make a play. Again, they have this Jinx against this immobile bot lane of Twitch and Zyra, where they like to do the combo of the Jinx stun with the CC from the support. So Mad Life actually just walks up here past the creeps and gets a hook onto Twitch, which looks good, and he even gets a good flay and some good damage. But here it is, and then Twitch pops heal and just starts shooting Mad Life, and Mad Life just dies to the damage. It's really just a big underestimation of how much damage he does and how he underestimated the damage that Twitch and Zyra do.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's just a few clips of Mad Life in the set against S, and like in the set against SK Telecom T1K,
the semifinals
of NLB. Space and Mad Life basically lost 2v2 fights for 4 games straight, and their team ended up winning the series. Here's just like one example clip of it. It's just Mad Life's playing Karma, and it appears that like they're doing pretty well in lane, chunking them down pretty low. But what ends up happening is a bit of over-aggression and a bit of, I guess, I don't want to say poor target selection because it's kind of hard to target the Kog'Maw in the back, but Mad Life sort of engages the fight, and these fights are always being engaged by Mad Life, like every single time. And Pumandu ends up just getting away, barely lives with Ignite, and Piglet ends up just picking up a double kill here. And it's just poor judgment, like especially at this level of play to consistently start these losing 2v2 fights. And we don't have clips from it, but in the final game in which SK Telecom T1K was eliminated, well, went to the third place match, but they were eliminated from the winners of NLB. Piglet ended up going 12-0. Yeah. He was 12-0. Basically, they went like 4-0 in lane, 2v2ing, winning a few fights, and CJ Frost still won. Like, it was just pretty ridiculous, and I think it's something that can be fixed. Like, I honestly think Mad Life is still team fighting pretty well.
Yep.
He's just getting a bit overzealous and starting a lot of fights that his team just can't win. And I guess some of it has to be on space, right? Like, maybe their synergy isn't
maybe they're
together.
Just not communicating properly. But we do see that Mad Life is playing all right. His mechanics seem all right. He's hitting his skill shots at least, and he's team fighting well, and he's supporting his team properly with good warding and all that sort of stuff. But his laning is the glaring weakness right now of his play, and it needs some work. He matches up very poorly against some of these top Korean teams.
Okay, so we went over CJ Frost and NaJin Blacksword's sort of journey to the finals of NLB. As this video is kind of coming out right before the finals, we sort of did it last minute. It's more of an analysis video than a prediction video, but we might as well throw it out there. Like, any thoughts on who's going to win the match?
Yeah, I think you have to give it to CJ Frost in this case. And I base it mostly on the fact that NaJin Blacksword has so many undetermines in who's going to show up to the game. I'm not sure if all 5 of the semifinals team will show up, or if their whole new team will show up, or if they'll have 4 subs, or any amount anywhere in between. I know Kane will be there, but besides that, everyone else is kind of uncertain.
I think they need to have some percentage of their roster. I think there's some sort of rules on that. I'm honestly not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but based on the uncertainty, I have to give it to Frost. They've been playing together for longer. If there's any subs in Blacksword, I'm going to say Frost, but I do want to mention if all 5 of the players from the semifinal show up, I do think Blacksword can take games from Frost. I think they have a chance of winning the set. I like some of these crazy picks, and I'm gonna be interested to see how Shy deals with them.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the limit is actually gonna be playing top, but if he was, it would be interesting to see, because I think CJ Frost is pretty smart at dealing with those sorts of picks, as we sort of saw in the clips we showed. But I don't know. We'll see. I think it'll be an interesting match. Well, if you've gotten this far, thanks for watching. This is sort of our first foray into actually making an analysis video. We spend a lot of our spare time kind of analyzing the game and doing a lot of like math and theory and that sort of stuff. So figured we can probably share some of this stuff with the community. I would love to hear what you guys think. We might actually throw up an English cast of the game if there's interest tomorrow. I know they do have English casters, but we can just cast over the VOD if there's demand for that. Or we can maybe throw out another video next week for the OGN finals if people actually like this sort of stuff. So let us know what you think. No, it's not perfect, but I don't know. I'm sure we'll improve if we make more of these things. So
yeah,
thanks for watching.
Yeah, thanks for watching.